3 hours. I'm joined in the studio now by Lee Rhiannon, the New South Wales Green Senator. Thanks very much for joining us. What do you make of what's being played out today?
Oh, look, clearly the Qantas CEO, Mr Joyce, is the extremist here. Shutting down all Qantas operations over the whole world is just totally out of place. I mean, and it's worth remembering the baggage handlers at our airports, their base rate is $40,000. Mr Joyce at the start of last week, had a salary of $3 million and then picks up an extra $2 million, a 71% increase. Like, it is just farcical.
Because it's come at the time when we just had the AGM, he's just been given his pay increase, and now in this union sort of exercise, it just seems to be that the timing, as we saw with Anthony Albanese, the government's not happy. It doesn't seem to be there's many people happy, there's a lot of passengers who are unhappy.
Oh, quite rightly so. And the way Mr Joyce is handling it, his own tactics are appalling, and I can understand why people are upset. Personally, I really am thankful the unions are taking the action, because it's not just about their own conditions and wages and standards, it's about safety as well. Like, I think for decades we've relied on Qantas having this good name and being safe, but there's been so many near misses lately. This is also a safety issue, and that's what we need to remember, that the action the workers are taking also covers that issue of standards.
At this point, we should say that the Greens do support the union action, have been very vocal on that. You were also sort of saying that Mr Joyce is the other 1%. What did you mean by that when you sort of mentioned that earlier on Twitter?
Look, it's become quite a slogan with the Occupy movement around the world, from Wall Street to Sydney to Melbourne, that the 1% who control so much of the wealth through very greedy activities are doing an enormous disservice. And here we're seeing a classic example of it, where you'd have probably at the start of last week, I'd say that Mr Joyce was already part of the 1% with a $3 million package, picks up an extra $2 million and takes this extreme action that's causing such inconvenience and driving down standards of how Qantas works, both in terms of the conditions for the workers, but this very important issue of safety.
And this is what you're saying, that what the Occupy protests around the world are looking at, and what they're talking about, and it's sort of workers having to stand up for their rights.
Yes, very much so. One thing, I did pop into Occupy Sydney a few times, and how people see it is that so often companies are putting profits before well-being.
Because Qantas is still a profitable company.
Well, very profitable, $534 million. So you'd have to say it's a classic case of what the Occupy movement is talking about. Profits coming before well-being. Here, the well-being of the working people for Qantas is suffering. Again, I just have to say that figure, $40,000 for a baggage handler. And Mr Joyce thinks he can get away with picking up millions of dollars and then shutting down the whole airline. I mean, it doesn't look good for how he's managing it.
Do you think that, the industrial action had been going on for such a long amount of time? Did you think that there has been a point where a line needs to be drawn in the sand, and that this issue government needs to get involved, or both parties, as Anthony Albanese said, need to behave like adults and need to get in and resolve this situation, which has the potential to do a lot of damage, not only to Qantas, but also to a lot of other institutions within Australia?
Oh, very much so, and internationally, our standing, not just of Qantas, would be suffering because of this action. But it does go back to Qantas and their CEO and the executives under him. The union have been trying to negotiate for months now, and regularly in these disputes, it's the union that gets a bad rap. But let's remember, working people are not readily going to go on strike. What do they gain out of it? They lose wages. Times just get tougher for them. Mr Joyce needs to be held responsible, and the government should be putting their weight on him to get down and negotiate something fair and safe, high standards.
But do you see the other point of view, I suppose, in that Qantas is a business, it's facing rising costs compared to other airlines, and it needs to restructure, and it needs to make sure that it can actually continue so that these people do have jobs further in the future?
Well, firstly, on those people having jobs, one of the big worries here is that the jobs will go offshore. Job security is a huge issue. So everybody's under pressure here. But let's remember, $534 million means that they can restructure and give a wage rise to their workers and maintain safety standards. They don't need to drive Qantas into the ground.
Okay, Green Senator Lee Rhiannon, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.